In 2024, in the relaunch of the Arena Football League, my love of the indoor football game was reignited. In the aughts, I grew to love the sport as it was a nice alternative to the traditional outdoor game, and its high-flying action and high-scoring games drew me in. Another thing I grew to love with the AFL was having teams in markets that the NFL wasn't in. Grand Rapids, Michigan, Iowa, Las Vegas, Orlando. It was a fresh space on a sport I myself was embracing in youth football, and would continue all the way until my senior year in high school. Of course, when I left high school and pursued a career in motorsports, my interest in football as a whole waned and I soon stopped following the AFL. Seeing it gone bust a second time in 2019 was kind of a wrap on something I had loved as a kid. I knew there were other leagues, but I simply didn't have the time or bandwidth to really dive back into it at the time. So in 2024, when the AFL was relaunched, I had hoped to rekindle my love of the indoor game. And then the relaunch happened. Whole swaths of teams and players weren't getting paid, teams going bust, and there was even teams playing in unsafe rodeo arenas. It was ridiculous how bad the AFL was upon its relaunch, but my fire for the sport was rekindled. But I didn't want to give the new AFL my attention, so I looked elsewhere. I discovered the IFL was almost at a point where the AFL was in the late 2010s. And it has been a fun league to follow, as it has 16 strong teams in a mostly Western-based league. But then I discovered I had a team a mere 55 minutes away from me in Greensboro, North Carolina, and they played in another league, the National Arena League. So of course, I started following the NAL and the Carolina Cobras. Unfortunately, this was probably the worst year to get into the NAL, as it underwent a lot of turmoil. Yeah. Honestly, I think we're lucky that the NAL made it through 2024, as it is looking towards 2025 with a lot of positive momentum. Unfortunately, 2024 needed to happen for 2025 to even be a thing. Things can only go up for the NAL. Following the 2023 season, the NAL went through a bit of a split. Former commissioner Chris Siegfried left to coach the West Texas Warbirds, now the Desert Hawks, who'd left to join the AFL 3.0. The Orlando Predators and former Albany Empire, now rebranded as the Firebirds, had also left to join the AFL. The defending champion Jacksonville Sharks and San Antonio Gunslingers had left to join the IFL, and the Fayetteville Mustangs had folded following Week 12 of the 2023 season due to financial difficulties. Of the 7 2023 teams, only the runner-up Carolina Cobras had remained. New current owner John Kane has recently stated that the team had gotten offers from both the AFL and IFL for 2024, but he stated that they believe that staying in the NAL for the long run was the better move. As much as I think that previous owner Rob Storm's financial difficulties probably played a bigger role into them not making the jump, the team remaining in the NAL was one of the few bright spots for the league, as it had one of its longtime pillars standing behind it. So who would the Cobras play? Well, the NAL looked to another league in turmoil, the Champions Indoor Football League. While the NAL was able to survive its fracturing, the CIF was not. While most CIF teams would merge with the AFL and help that league achieve its target relaunch goal of an absurd 16 teams in its first year, that league's juggernauts, the Omaha Beef and Sioux City Bandits, would join the NAL instead. Following the Beef and Bandits would be the Topeka Tropics, a team who had one win in their 2 years of existence, and the long-dormant Oklahoma Flying Aces, who hadn't played a game since 2019. The league would also add the Idaho Horsemen, formerly of the now-defunct American West Football Conference, the North Texas Bulls, who had won the American Arena League Championship in 2021 but had recently gone through a couple years of turmoil themselves, and the expansion Colorado Spartans. But before the season would even start, poo was already hitting the fan for the NAL. On February 16th of this year, the league terminated its membership of the Bulls, and on the 28th had done the same with the Tropics. The league had given the Bulls multiple opportunities to quote-unquote meet league requirements, but were forced to make the hard decision at the last second. And since, I haven't really found any news concerning the franchise, but considering that there's another indoor football team in the DFW area, the highly successful Frisco Fighters in the IFL, I don't really think the Bulls would have been successful in the NAL. The Tropics were quite forthcoming with their troubles. The turmoil with the CIF collapse hurt the struggling team, and they couldn't meet league dues. As a result, ownership tried selling the team, but could not find a buyer in time, and as a result, the team folded shortly after its termination announcement. So that left just 6 teams to compete in 2024, down from 7 in 2023. Lots of turmoil before the season even got off the ground, so let's look at the 6 teams that competed in the National Arena League in 2024 and see how they perform. So in order of worst to first, let's get going. Touchdown! Honestly, in my personal opinion, there were a ton of red flags concerning the Oklahoma Flying Aces headed into 2024. This team had not competed since 2019 in the CIF, and had not competed since COVID canceled the 2020 CIF season. They also blamed, at the time, increased workers' comp insurance for the 2021 season for failing to get going again, and replaced with the reborn Dodge City Law, which brought along a lot of the original Flying Aces roster and staff. But a big mark I'd make against this team is the fact that they played in Enid, Oklahoma. Not Tulsa, not Oklahoma City, not any of the 6 other larger cities in Oklahoma that are larger than Enid. Enid is a small city with a population of 51,000, so unless that team really got the town behind them, they were always going to fight an uphill battle. The Chisholm Trail Expo Center, where the team played, sits 32.9 miles from the closest interstate. So yeah, tiny market, shaky history, and expectedly the team went dormant again after playing just 4 games. They lost all 4 as well. I really don't think this team returns for 2025, but I wouldn't be surprised if they don't, as the NAL is really making their vet-in process for new teams harder to prevent further situations like the Flying Aces, Bulls, or Tropics. There's a lot of interest in launching teams for this niche sport, and it's tough to build a fan base. And the Flying Aces, unfortunately, are an example with just how tough it is to succeed in arena football. Touchdown! The Idaho Horsemen had a tough 2024, expectedly, but they at least had a 5-year track record of stability. The team was launched in 2019 with interest in joining either the IFL or CIF, but with the instability of both leagues at the time, owner Chris Reynolds decided to start his own Pacific Northwest-based league to build a following in a region of the country that often gets left behind in professional sports. So after 4 seasons in the American West Football Conference running its course, Reynolds took the Horsemen to the struggling NAL over the promises of the relaunched AFL. Jumping from a league that's more semi-pro than pro to the NAL, which has a product that put on equal or better than the current AFL, it was gonna be a struggle for the Horsemen. They finished the season 1-7 with their lone win coming against the even worse Oklahoma Flying Aces. Their biggest issue was the fact that they sit on such a geographical island compared to the previous seasons, meaning that often much of their starting offense couldn't go to road games as they had to focus on their day jobs. These players don't get paid much and are often local guys looking to make the next step, but they have to make tough choices like that. It's tough to be successful having to fill a roster for every road game, but Reynolds was able to achieve that, and honestly, despite only winning 1 game, much of their games were closer than one would think. They play in a decent market, playing at the Ford Idaho Center in Nampa, Idaho, which is part of the Boise metropolitan area. So like the NAL itself, 2024 was a building year for the Horsemen. If the NAL is able to get more PNW and Mountain West teams so the Horsemen aren't on such an island by themselves regionally, I think that it would help Idaho greatly with travel costs and grind, especially if Reynolds doesn't have to put together a new team almost every week. Maybe the NAL is able to grab another AWFC team or attract the Oregon Black Bears or Washington Wolfpack from the AFL to better fill in their PNW footprint for the Horsemen. Chris Reynolds is a dedicated owner, and I fully expect this team to be better off in 2025 than they were in 2024. Touchdown! The Colorado Spartans were the lone actual quote-unquote expansion team for the NAL in 2024. They were actually supposed to be an expansion team for the CIF, but the merger with the NAL happened before they could fully enter in the league. Playing in the Blue Arena in Loveland, Colorado, the Spartans also gave the NAL something that the IFL and AFL didn't have: a team located near Denver, Colorado. Technically, they play in the Fort Collins-Loveland metro area, but still just 46 miles from Denver itself, which isn't a bad drive to see a football game. They are also the first indoor team in the area since the IFL's Colorado Crush folded in 2017, who also played at the Blue Arena. They weren't half bad for being an expansion team, finishing the year 4-5. This was a scrappy team to watch, beating the NAL stalwarts the Carolina Cobras twice during the season. For 2024 teams, they ended up kind of being in a centralized location between Idaho and Omaha, Sioux City, so they didn't have the crazy travel some of the other teams would have. Idaho, Carolina. Overall, the Spartans ended up being a respectable team for their first season as a franchise, and I would consider them an outside threat for the 2025 playoffs. They would have been the fourth and last ranked team in the NAL playoffs if the NAL hadn't scrapped the playoffs due to Oklahoma falling out and leaving with just 5 teams to finish the season. My one big thing with them from last year was the fact that their local announcing crew for their live streams were among the absolute most unprofessional I've ever seen in anything. Yeah, especially when the playoffs got scrapped. Like, give it a rest, guys. You're professionals.
On that pass, love to see that. So with that 2-point conversion, the Spartans take a 28-8. I'm sorry. I gave them too much credit, Silky. I thought maybe they have more points than what they did.
They won't.
28-6 lead against the visiting and allegedly first place Omaha Beef. 3:17 left to go in the first quarter.
I say, if we're the one team to beat the undefeated team, why wouldn't you give us a chance? If nobody else can beat them, but we beat them, why don't we get in there? It doesn't matter what Carolina did, honestly, because Carolina hasn't beat them. If they don't beat them, guess what? We're the one team.
Hey, if they can change it in mid-season, can they change it at the end of the season and maybe open it back up to 4 teams?
They've been changing it all season. Every game has been a different rule. Might as well go ahead and change it now. You're seeing it. I don't think they were expecting us to beat them. I mean, there's still plenty of games to play.
Oh, yeah, a lot of football left to go. That's no doubt about it.
It's always been tough to be a first-year team in a new market, but this team was a solid surprise for 2024. Let's see if they can capitalize on some forward momentum for 2025. Touchdown! The Carolina Cobras are the longtime stalwarts of the National Arena League and play in the legendary Greensboro Coliseum in Greensboro, North Carolina. The Cobras had a rough 2024 by their standards. Due to the NAL's reshuffling, they ended up on their own geographical island as the only East Coast team remaining in the league, meaning that all of their away games ended up being long hikes in different time zones. On top of that, owner Rob Storm had some legal and business issues during the season, forcing the team to move on without him during the season and the ultimate sale to John Kane at season's end. With all of that going on in the background, it was no surprise that the Cobras season kind of sputtered to a halt towards the end of the season. Going into the final couple of weeks, the Cobras actually had an outside chance of facing Omaha in the championship game. But 2 straight losses to both Omaha and Sioux City did them in. Still, despite the drama, and despite the tough road schedule, Carolina still finished 5-4. This is a fan favorite, and they entered 2025 with a new reinvigorated ownership group under Mr. Kane. And they've already announced the return of coach Brendan Negron. I fully intend on going to as many Cobra games as I can next season, as they are my local team, so expect some in-person content next season on this channel with the Cobras. Touchdown! The first half of the I-29 rivalry with the Omaha Beef, the Sioux City Bandits have a history as long and as storied as the Beef. Joining Omaha and joining the NAL for 2024, these 2 teams were probably the 2 biggest gets for the NAL for the 2024 season. With as much turmoil as there was going into the season, getting these 2 storied franchises and their dedicated fan bases into the NAL over the IFL or AFL was one of the few preseason feathers in the NAL's caps. And boy, they were a threat in 2024. 5-3, losing only to Omaha and Carolina during the regular season. And a late season push and key wins over Carolina and Idaho were barely enough to eke the Bandits into the championship game against their longtime rivals Omaha. Part of the late season's success was the late season signing of veteran quarterback Vernon Reed Jr. Dude was absolutely what the Bandits needed to take the next step for the postseason. But of course, as good as the Bandits were at the end of the 2024 season, they still had to face Omaha. What can I say? The Omaha Beef were by far the stars of the National Arena League in 2024. Emerging from the lost 2020 CIF season, Omaha has been an absolute tear since 2021. 2021 and 2023 CIF championships, runner-up in 2022, and not having lost a single game since that 2022 Champions Bowl. The Beef are what many consider to be one of the most elite in arena football right now. Tommy Armstrong Jr. is the star of the show at quarterback, and he can throw and run with the best of them. And he's absolutely dominated over CIF and NAL defenses in the last 2 seasons, and rightfully earned the National Arena League Player of the Year after winning the Beef's first NAL championship this past year. He had 20 regular season rushing touchdowns, far above anybody else in the league. But his support is just as deadly against NAL defenses. The receiving core are all just as good. Troy Evans Jr., Coral Colmos, and Jordan Barton are each capable of bringing in Armstrong's passes for big gains and touchdowns. On defense, they're just as potent, led by the dominant Ponce de Leon at defensive back, who recorded a team high of 43 tackles and 4 interceptions. In the championship game, he recorded a team high of 11 tackles and a single interception. With Armstrong and de Leon, the Beef have the 2 most dominant offensive and defensive players in the NAL, and they were key in the Beef's close win over the Bandits. Touchdown! Quite possibly, the 2024 National Arena League Championship game was probably one of the best football games I have ever watched. The Beef controlled the first half, but the Bandits were able to claw their way in to tie the game at the very end of regulation. Then not just one, but 2 overtimes that both teams were able to respond to each other by scoring touchdowns. In fact, it was kicker Paul Ortiz that made an extra point after a dry spell throughout much of the game, who had won the Beef the game 47-46 over the Bandits. It was simply incredible football all around, and it was exactly the championship game the National Arena League needed after their tough 2024. While leading up to the game, I was growing scared over the future of the NAL. Watching this game and its incredible start-to-finish action, fueled by the die-hard rivalry of the Beef and the Bandits, it felt like a turning point for the NAL for me. This was the spark the NAL needed to right the ship. And in the couple months since, the NAL has been following it up with positive news on the regular. To put it lightly, the 2024 National Arena League season was a roller coaster. An exodus of teams and personnel before the season, the attempts to replace them just for much of them to fold either before or during the season, the background uncertainty of the Cobras, it wasn't looking good. But despite this, the championship game rose above the rest of the season and to me personally has helped the NAL get back on track. The week after the championship game, the Wheeldon Miners of the American Arena League 2 announced that they were joining the league. Originally scheduled to play in the reborn American Indoor Football League for 2024 as a new team, the Miners stepped back to play in the AAL2 this season to focus on building their base for the future. Fantastic local marketing, which brought good crowds to the Westbanco Arena, streams of home games that fit in perfectly with the IFL's best, and the building of a team that would become one of the hottest prospects for competing in leagues in 2025. The Miners were a necessary get for the NAL next season. They bring some much-needed presence back to the East Coast after a bulk of their teams moved to the Midwest and Mountain West this season, especially as this helps lower travel costs for Carolina. This is one of the teams to watch for 2025. But that's not all. Shortly before that, the Cobras announced that John Kane had completed his purchase of the majority stake of the team, which shores them up for 2025 after the doubts that emerged in May of 2024. But even bigger than that is the fact that the NAL and AIF have what they call not a merger. But in all actuality, it's pretty much a merger. AIF President Brendan Eichart has joined the NAL board of directors and as an executive director. He brings a wealth of experience himself and helps to shore up the NAL's front office. But even bigger is the fact that on July 9th, the top 3 AIF teams, or more specifically the 3 teams that were able to weather the storm of the AIF's tumultuous 2024 season, the Columbus Lions, Corpus Christi Tritons, and Harrisburg Stampede, would join the NAL. The Lions were charter members of the NAL, and have a history almost as long and as storied as the Beef and the Bandits. Despite not winning the NAL championship in their original 5-year run, they still have a total of 5 league championships, including absolutely dominating the AIF last season and finishing undefeated. The Tritons were the new team for 2024, bringing indoor football back to Corpus Christi and building easily the number 2 team of the AIF last season. South Texas has a strong football culture, and the city has embraced the team with open arms. And finally, there's the Harrisburg Stampede, a relaunch of the storied franchise from the original run of the AIF in the early 2010s, and bringing back original head coach Bernie Nowotowski to lead the group. The AIF's torrid season that saw other teams folding and getting kicked out hurt teams like the Stampede as their schedule became hard to follow for fans. But a 2025 season in a bolstered league with much stronger teams will help the Stampede in the long run. And despite all this good news, there's still possibly more good news. As of right now, there's still the chance that the Amarillo Venom, a longtime franchise that has struggled to stay afloat thanks to the AIF's issues last season, get in too, on top of a new expansion team in the Beaumont Renegades. A team former Super Bowl champion, Jacoby Jones, was actually supposed to head coach before his untimely death in July of 2024. As well as the T's 10th NAL team that NAL officials promised during the AIF announcement. As of late July, early August, there's been no official announcement for that team, but early signs are pointing towards a Shreveport, Louisiana expansion. So as of right, in 2025 is already going to be a much better season for the National Arena League. There's 9 confirmed solid teams, including 3 undefeated champions from their respective leagues from the year before. You add in the possible Shreveport, Amarillo, and Beaumont teams, that brings the NAL to a league record of 12 teams. And that's before you get to the possibility of AFL teams jumping ship as that league looks to get back to more of a big market league again, and the possibility of more American West Football Conference teams filling in as well to help Idaho. The future is bright for a league that was teetering on collapse the offseason before. The National Arena League needed 2024 to happen to get to this point. Arena and indoor football splintered way too much into competing leagues last season, and the National Arena League was a victim of that. But going into 2025, the sport of a whole is looking its brightest since the AFL 2.0's collapse 5 years ago. Keep an eye on the National Arena League for 2025. I think this league will really surprise some people in 2025. Anyways, I really hope you enjoyed this video. I do plan on doing some similar videos for the AFL, AIF, and IFL as well. And I do plan on doing full preseason previews of those leagues or what's left of them at the new year. Heck, I'll try to do some news videos sprinkled in here and there if I can during the offseason as teams come and go, leagues expand and contract. The world of indoor football has always been an ever-evolving one, even at the AFL's height of the aughts. So stay tuned. If you liked this video and have run out of arena football content to watch, I also run a small used car review channel called Wookie Drives. Check that out if you like. I try to tell the history and stories of used cars, so yeah, check that out. Be sure to give this video a like, drop a comment with some feedback. Any sort of interaction with this video really helps small channels like mine grow in the algorithm. Share with all your arena and indoor football friends. And finally, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell for notifications for more videos like these. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.